A transmission begins, showing a broadcast from space. A giant vinyl record floats serenely above Earth. Moments later, a colossal space station erupts into countless pieces, exploding in the vast emptiness of space. The recording continues, revealing the logo of the ship, the Atalanta, now completely torn apart. Drifting in the void, a man appears. He introduces himself as Major Jung-soo, a crew member of the Atalanta. With visible sorrow, he announces devastating news. The Arcadia mission, humanity's last hope for relocation, has failed. The reflection of the destruction glints off his helmet as he delivers the grim message. It all began like a cliché, he says. Humanity, unable to reverse the escalating environmental crisis, chose survival over restoration. The decision was made: abandon Earth. A grand planetary migration was initiated. Enormous rockets were launched toward a distant world. Their destination? A planet known as Kepler 325b. The mission was dubbed Arcadia, a name meant to symbolize paradise. But before reaching it, the Atalanta was destroyed in an attack. Most of the crew, still in hibernation, was likely lost. Despite knowing Arcadia could be humanity's new beginning, Jung-soo admits there's nothing he can do now. With arms outstretched, he hopes his message reaches Earth, that someone remembers the crew. As he accepts his fate, his hand brushes against something strange floating nearby. Taking a closer look, he realizes it's his guitar, just drifting through the void. He hugs the instrument tightly, mourning the fact that he won't get to finish the album he planned to record in Arcadia. He had dreamed of playing in a band forever, but now, that dream seems impossible. With his hand on the neck of the guitar, he prepares to play one final tune before the end. Among the wreckage and silence of space, he strums his last song, thinking how much of a bummer this all turned out to be. Suddenly, a strange noise catches his attention. He stops playing. A display on his suit lights up. Escape pod approaching in 32 seconds. Stunned, he looks around. A small craft with thrusters appears, speeding straight toward him. It stops directly in front of him, marked with the Atalanta logo. The hatch opens. Without hesitation, he climbs inside. The door seals, and the pod lurches forward violently, hurling him to the back. An electronic voice instructs him to strap in securely and informs him that pulling the lever will launch him toward the nearest gravity well. He grabs the lever, muttering to himself that maybe he was being too sentimental. Maybe it's not his time to check out just yet. The pod hurtles into the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Flames engulf its exterior, making it look like a meteor screaming toward the surface. Below, a vast field of red flowers stretches endlessly. Parachutes deploy just in time to slow the descent, but the landing is still brutal. The craft smashes into the ground, sending up a thick cloud of dust. Half buried in soil, its main chute draped beside it, the pod rests silently. With a loud bang, the hatch is blasted open by the impact. Stumbling out, disoriented by the planet's gravity, the Major can barely stand. He looks around at the field of flowers, wondering if he's somehow died and reached paradise. But this doesn't feel like heaven or the other place. He concludes it must be Arcadia. Standing amidst the red blossoms, he realizes he's actually made it to Kepler 325b. Continuing his transmission, he reports he has reached his final destination, alone. The temperature is 23 degrees and oxygen levels read 12%. Just as he finishes the report, something catches his eye. On the horizon, a lone figure stands among the flowers. He calls out, asking if they're a crew member and what their name is. But the figure vanishes. Suddenly, a strange goo drips onto his helmet. He looks up. Above him looms a grotesque creature, a twisted fusion of insect and skeleton. Its razor-sharp claw lifts high into the air. Before he can react, it strikes with terrifying force, sending him flying. He crashes hard, tumbling across the ground, dazed. But he scrambles back to his feet, heart pounding, ready for whatever comes next. He sees the monster's reflection in his helmet and is stunned. What in the world is that thing, he thinks. He considers running, but the creature blocks his only escape. Its glowing red eye locks onto him. It's clear. This beast isn't letting him go. With no other choice, he pulls a small survival knife from his belt. Standard issue for emergencies like this. A second weapon, a retractable blade, extends from his boot. Armed and determined, he charges the creature, searching for any weak point. In one swift move, he slides under the beast, dodging its claws, positioning himself for a counterattack. But the creature's tail smacks him into the air, sending him flying, unable to grab onto anything. The monster quickly turns and readies its pointed tail to strike the man again. Unfazed, he He uses the momentum to fearlessly scale the giant creature's back. He runs along the monster's spine, racing toward its head to end the fight once and for all. The astronaut lands right in front of the beast, which opens its massive jaws to devour him. To avoid falling, he plunges his knife into the ground, using all his strength to hold his ground. With a plan in mind, the Major begins climbing up the creature's face, aiming directly for its eyes. The monster's terrifying red eye reflects the image of the man closing in to strike. Once close enough, he channels all his might into a single punch aimed at the eye. With a direct hit, he shatters the protective layer covering the beast's eye, causing it to reel back in agony. The creature screams in pain as a stream of purple liquid oozes from the wounded eye. Thrashing violently, it hurls him away, but he manages to cling to part of its body. Infuriated by the attack, the monster tries to crush the man with its massive razor-sharp legs. Pinned beneath the creature's claws, he realizes there's nowhere left to run and curses his luck. Just then, an electronic targeting reticle appears, locking onto the monster. The mysterious figure from earlier reappears, holding an enormous weapon aimed squarely at the beast. With a finger on the trigger, the stranger prepares to fire and save the astronaut from certain death. A powerful red laser beam bursts from the weapon, streaking straight toward the monster's head. The shot lands directly on its skull, erupting in a blast of purple energy. Gravely wounded, the monster stumbles backward, while the Major watches in awe from the ground. A gaping hole now scars the creature's head, and its glowing red eyes burn with unrestrained fury. The mysterious figure lands gracefully, weapon in hand. It's a colossal rifle. The force of the blast sends the beast tumbling backward as the new warrior readies for another strike. Despite its wounds, the monster lashes out with sharp claws, desperate to kill its new foe. The weapon doubles as a blade, and the warrior uses it to block the creature's leg. With sheer strength, the red-clad figure deflects the blow and forces the monster back. Taking advantage of the opening, the warrior jams the weapon's tip into the creature's gaping mouth. The beast tries to bite down, but the figure quickly activates another mechanism. Inside the weapon, sharpened stakes prepare for release at full power. With a deafening shot, the stakes fire, piercing the roof of the monster's mouth and inflicting devastating damage. The beast collapses to the ground, defeated, as the warrior pulls the weapon free. Still kneeling, the Major watches the aftermath in stunned silence as his savior rests on the weapon. He tries to express his gratitude, but is cut off before he can finish. The figure in red turns without a word and walks away. Confused by their cold demeanor, the astronaut is left unsure of what to say or do. In an attempt to get their attention, he throws his knife to the ground in front of the mysterious warrior. Though their presence feels threatening, something about it seems oddly human. The knife lands in the dust, kicking up a small cloud, and the astronaut waits for a reaction. The warrior stops and, in a strange language, asks if he is an Earthling. Realizing the figure may be human-like, he decides to remove his helmet, hoping to communicate more clearly. He believes showing his face will convey peace and gratitude. With that, the Major lifts off his helmet, revealing his face in a gesture of trust. The mysterious figure watches in silence, a puff of blue smoke escaping their lips. After a pause, the warrior begins fiddling with their weapon again, ignoring him. Then, in an unexpected moment, the warrior removes her helmet, revealing her true identity. The Major is stunned. Watching intently, he sees a blue-skinned woman with a shy gaze. He realizes that both the creature and he are likely alien to her species. So why didn't she attack him? Is it because he resembles them? She stares at him for a moment before offering a canteen of water. The Major hesitates, unsure if it's safe. Thoughts race through his mind. What if it's ethanol or acid? Sensing his doubt, the woman draws a diagram in the sand, an image that clearly represents water. Pointing to it, she says a word, chi, introducing herself. With oxygen levels at 12%, he briefly opens his helmet to take a cautious sip. As he drinks, he recalls a key protocol from mission briefings. If humanity ever encountered intelligent alien life, English would be the default language of first contact. It was advised to speak with formality and politeness. After drinking, he thanks her and returns the canteen. Introducing himself as Dong Young Soo, he says it's a pleasure to meet her. The blue-skinned woman responds with a strange word, Lunjit. He realizes communication will be difficult without a shared language. Just as he's about to try again, a massive vehicle barrels through the field of red flowers. The armored truck tows a crane that moves swiftly toward them. They secure the monster's body with ropes, preparing to transport it elsewhere. Looking out over the scarlet flower fields of the planet Bumi, the Major feels like one lucky survivor. Inside the vehicle, Chi drives, and he learns the planet is called Bumi. But this paradise holds a grim secret. The entire planet is expected to be destroyed in just 5 years. The dead creature is tied down to prevent it from falling off during transport. The Major records a message, saying he has survived and reached his destination. He reflects on the remarkable humanity he found on this distant world. Yet, he also notes the tragedy of its short future. They arrive at a massive concrete structure in the middle of the flower field. The vehicle enters a towering gate, resembling a grim industrial hangar. Inside, they board an elevator platform and descend through a tunnel toward a glowing light. The car emerges into a colossal, shadowy space, filled with strange, imposing architecture. They come to a stop, and the woman's helmet rests on a nearby platform. Towering pillars, like immense gray mushrooms, surround them. The blue-skinned woman exits the vehicle while the Major observes her quietly. She ascends a metal catwalk and approaches a control panel. Speaking through a communicator, she reports something in her native language. The astronaut watches from afar, unable to understand what's being said. After finishing, she stands still, lost in thought. The Major continues to study her, trying to unravel the mystery of this place. Meanwhile, the woman begins cutting off the monster's head with a massive blade. She continues processing the beast's carcass with remarkable skill and precision. From within the creature, she pulls out a dark, gooey substance with her bare hands. Moments later, a piece of the monster's meat is tossed onto the floor, as if it were ordinary food. The towering mushrooms react instantly. Several tentacles shoot out toward the meat, grabbing and devouring it like ravenous animals. The Major wonders if these strange mushrooms are cultivated for sustenance. Feeling that simply watching isn't right, he decides to help, hoping it will strengthen their bond. Sensing his intent, the blue-skinned woman points to a part of the monster, silently asking for his assistance. Without complaint, the astronaut hoists a heavy chunk of the carcass and carries it to where she indicated. The woman, clearly exhausted, wipes sweat from her brow as she watches him work. The platform they stand on becomes slick with the creature's purple fluid, staining everything beneath them. After the work is done, she finally thanks him, calling him by name. An awkward silence follows, the language barrier still looming large between them. He realizes they truly don't understand each other and needs to find a better way to communicate. The woman speaks in her language and gestures for him to follow her to another part of the base. She returns to the catwalk and speaks into her communicator again, using unfamiliar words. The Major listens carefully, trying to repeat them to himself, slowly beginning to memorize the sounds. As he follows her, he notices she's working at a table. Curious, he approaches and spots a few small sculptures of animals, crafted from an unknown material. He picks up one of the sculptures and asks if she made it, genuinely thinking it looks cute. The woman seems surprised to see him touching her artwork and freezes for a moment. Then, suddenly, she slaps his hand, and he drops the sculpture in shock. She stiffens, her whole body tensing. The astronaut wonders if she's angry for touching her things, but looking at her expression, he realizes she's not angry, just embarrassed. Wanting to ease the tension, he thinks about complimenting her art, but words are still beyond their reach. Then he remembers. A smile means something good in nearly every culture across the universe. He gives her a wide, awkward grin, only to horrify her. His forced smile fails miserably, turning into a nightmarish attempt at friendliness. He considers a thumbs up, but recalls that it might be offensive in some cultures. Instead, he forms a heart with his hands, a universal symbol of love and goodwill. He points to the sculpture, then makes the heart shape again, hoping she'll understand that he genuinely liked it. The woman looks startled by the gesture, but no longer afraid. She studies his actions closely and, after a pause, seems to understand. She then picks up one of her sculptures and offers it to him as a gift. Extending her hand, she says the word, Balaya. He accepts the gift and asks if the sculpture's name is Balaya. With great care, he pats the head of the little statue and, smiling warmly, compliments its craftsmanship. The woman blushes and gently touches her lips, clearly flustered by the kind gesture. Then she calls him by name and invites him to see something else. She leads him to a table in the center of the room, where a holographic projector hums quietly. With a gentle smile, she activates it, revealing the image of an animal resembling a dinosaur. She says the word again, Balaya. He realizes then, Balaya is the name of the animal, not the sculpture. She continues, showing more statues and holograms. one of a bizarre creature called a yerapa, then others, Bangkok, Rumpeng, and finally a cattle. Thinking to himself, the Major concludes that she loves animals. He tries hard to memorize the strange names, but struggles. Comparing these charming animals to the monstrous beasts they fought earlier, he becomes curious. He wants to know what that creature was called, but the woman misunderstands. With a soft expression, she forms a heart with her hands and asks in her language what he likes. An idea strikes him. He grabs his device and luckily finds the photo he was looking for. He shows it to her, and Langit's eyes light up with wonder. The photo is of a cute cat named Kondoki. He grins and asks if she doesn't think it's adorable. Then, suddenly remembering protocol, he hears the scolding voice of his training officer in his mind, reminding him to always use polite English in first contact situations. But he brushes the thought aside. It's okay to be excited about your cat. To his surprise, the woman repeats his words, but in a strange, jumbled way. She tries again, mimicking the phrase in her own language, and laughs. The Major gently corrects her, explaining it's a cat, and vows to choose his words more carefully. He realizes then, this shared love for animals might be the key to bridging their worlds. Joy, he thinks, is universal. That's when he remembers something else he loves, music, his guitar. He asks Langit to wait a moment, and rushes back to the vehicle, digging through supplies until he finds his guitar, miraculously still in good condition. He returns with the instrument in hand, excited to share this part of himself. Langit looks at him, confused, clearly unsure what he plans to do with this strange object. The Major sits down, explaining that he's about to share what he loves most in the universe, his music. He begins to play a soft, melodic tune, his fingers dancing gently over the strings. But just as Langit starts to listen, a small robot with wheels suddenly rushes toward them. The bot bursts into the room, shouting Langit's name in a panicked voice. Langit's face shifts from curiosity to alarm. The robot, with long, bunny-like ears, speaks rapidly in its strange tongue, clearly delivering a warning. Tears well in its glowing eyes as it continues yelling, trying to alert them to an approaching danger. Getting closer, the little bot stops right in front of them, and the Major halts his song, completely baffled by the interruption. The astronaut would only later understand what the small robot was trying so desperately to say. Langit's expression turns to alarm as she quickly asks the robot what's happening with Ingress. At the time, the Major could only stand there confused, but he later realized the truth. The robot was trying to warn them of something urgent. Ingress, one of their companions, was in grave danger. The small machine repeated the warning several times, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. The astronaut watched the scene unfold with a mix of confusion and growing concern. Shocked by the news, Langit asked once more what had happened to Ingress. But this time, she didn't wait for an answer. Without a second thought, she leapt from the armored vehicle and sprinted toward danger. Landing with agile grace, the young woman prepared to charge ahead. The Major didn't hesitate either. He quickly followed, determined to help however he could. Together with the frantic robot, they ran toward a massive red door deep inside the base. As the bot cried out Ingress's name again and again, Langit reached the door and tried to open it, but the control panel failed. The Major, seeing her frustration, stepped closer and asked if the door was broken. With everything going on, he was starting to suspect that the situation in this place was far from normal. Desperate, the woman shouted for the door to open, slamming her hands against it, the robot joining in. Looking closely, the Major noticed the track of the gate was bent downward. He began to wonder, had some enormous force caused that damage? Langit kept trying to force the door open with raw strength, sweat glistening on her face. It was clear they were trying to brute force their way through. The robot said something to her, prompting her to kneel before the door and make another attempt. This time, the bot extended an arm and connected it to the input panel, trying to hack the system. The Major took a step forward, placing a hand on Langit's shoulder and motioning for her to move aside. "Let me try," he said, determined. He approached the gate and positioned his hand in a narrow gap. Activating his power glove, he channeled energy into his arm, then drove his fist into the metal with a thunderous punch. With a burst of force, he broke through, creating a hole in the door large enough to slip through. Wasting no time, the Major rushed inside to assess the situation. There, lying on the floor, was a red-skinned man, alone, unconscious, and severely injured. Langit entered just after him, her eyes wide with horror as she screamed, "Ingress!" She dashed to his side and knelt beside him, her hands trembling. The man's eyes were dark, and a strange pink smoke was seeping from his mouth and wounds. Scattered near him were several broken cylinders and a pool of thick red liquid. Moments later, the little robot arrived, shouting Langet's name as it hurried to assist. It produced 2 small cylinders, filled with brightly colored liquid. The robot handed one to Langet. With urgency and precision, she tore Ingris's shirt open and injected the contents of the cylinder directly into his chest. The blue fluid surged into his body, and Ingris let out a guttural scream as it took effect. Gradually, his skin, once red, began shifting to a bluish tone. His breathing slowed. The glow in his dark eyes dimmed. The transformation completed. Ingris now had the same calm, blue skin as Langet. She asked if he was okay, and with a weak hand resting on his chest, he nodded. "I'm all right now," he whispered. As he regained consciousness, his gaze wandered to the stranger standing in the room, the Major. The astronaut remained silent, not quite sure what had just happened. The 2 aliens spoke quietly in their language, while he stood to the side, waiting for clarity. Langet helped Ingris to his feet, supporting his weight as they leaned on one another. Then, she turned and motioned for the astronaut to follow them, deeper into the base. The small robot wiggled its antennae and approached the Major, gesturing for him to come. He nodded and stood beside the little machine, curious to see where this was all leading. Hiji, now introducing itself for the first time, led him down a dark staircase to a lower part of the base. The robot made an exaggerated gesture with its ears to get his attention, then pointed its mechanical arm at a screen on the wall. It projected an image, a sweeping view of the red flower fields, and a close-up of strange, claw-like appendages. "Boomy," the robot said, referring to the planet they were on. The Major repeated the word, "Boomy," carefully committing it to memory. Next, Hiji said the word, "Sheda," and made a circular motion with its arm. The screen displayed an image of the sun and the planet, clearly a vocabulary lesson. Then came 2 more words, Nadad and Panan. Hiji's tone grew serious as it said them. The Major repeated each one with care, focusing on the pronunciation. He deduced that Sheda meant correct, Nadad meant incorrect, and Boomy was the name of the planet. The robot continued. It projected an image of a meteor crashing down and said, Ragbat. Then, an image of a decaying body, followed by the word Mot. The Major frowned. Ragbat, likely meteor. Mot, perhaps death, corpse, or the end of something. Returning to the room, he found Langet and Ingris watching him with curious eyes. The astronaut grew thoughtful, trying to piece together the message Hiji had shown him. Langet picked up his guitar, admiring the instrument with a sense of wonder. Ingris knelt before him, placing a hand on his chest and speaking in his native tongue, softly, respectfully. Both of them made a formal gesture, hand to heart, as they introduced themselves to him properly. The Major stepped back, unsure how to respond. Still stunned, he asked what had happened and why they were acting so formally. With solemn eyes, Ingris explained, a meteor had fallen, and now, because of it, they were all in danger. The robot, Hiji, begins gesturing with its arms, trying to explain the situation. It projects an image of a massive explosion to convey the gravity of the problem. The Major's helmet fogs slightly with condensation as he watches, stunned. Ingris explains that the meteor is headed toward planet Boomy at incredible speed. Langet clutches the guitar tightly and says, the planet's end will come in 5 years. The Major repeats the phrase aloud, trying to grasp the meaning of these strange words. Hiji once again projects an image of the sun and the planet to illustrate the orbital cycle. It makes a circular motion with its arm, indicating that Bera is the time it takes for Boomy to orbit the sun. The Major understands now Bera means year and begins to wonder about the word Lima. The robot then holds up 5 fingers, indicating that Lima means the number 5. Ingris solemnly explains that in 5 years, a meteor will strike and destroy everything on the planet. The Major is floored by the revelation. His mind races, struggling to process what he's heard. He thinks of all the people on this world, a world soon to be wiped away forever. Suddenly, a robotic voice calls him by his ID number and informs him that he's in the final stage of thawing. It requests he state his name, rank, position, and mission. If any of the data is inconsistent, it warns, a bodily dismemberment procedure will be initiated. The voice adds that if he requires assistance to restore his memory, he simply needs to ask. The Major stares ahead blankly, lost in thought, wondering who he truly is. Seated with his guitar, he absent-mindedly strums a few chords, as if fishing for memories in the sound. The only thing that feels real to him now is the melody, the one he always played on his guitar. A memory surfaces, him playing alone at Houston Space Force Base, when his friend Dean would drop by with lyrics, rapping over his tune. Another memory, a younger version of himself playing guitar in a modest boarding house, where a girl named Maria would sing for her live streams using his music. He had always dreamed of performing in front of 100,000 people. That dream had fueled his passion for music. He never stopped playing. The robotic voice repeats its request. Name, rank, position, and mission. Snapping back to the present, the Major straightens up. "Major Dong Young-soo," he says with resolve. "Head of maintenance, ship Adelante." The robot congratulates him and asks for his personal call sign. With clarity returning, he firmly spells it out. ROCKSTAR. His memories lock into place. His call sign is Rockstar. He reaffirms his mission: maintain the ship Adelante and protect its crew. Suddenly, he remembers. He is the only surviving crew member. His thoughts turn to the ship. If he can find Adelante's engine, maybe, just maybe, something can be done. Ingress and Langet look at him with hopeful eyes. With determination in his voice, the Major declares, "Planet Boomy will not perish. The mission is not over." Ingress, cautious, repeats what he said earlier, that the planet will be destroyed in 5 years. No hope. But the astronaut stands firm. Boomy will not be destroyed. No way. He gathers his books and begins preparing to explain. Opening volumes on English and the periodic table, he tries to decide where to begin. The robot Higi comes over and begins flipping through one of the books, eager to learn more about him. The Major watches in surprise. "Is that human writing?" Higi asks. He nods, and Higi immediately begins scanning the pages, absorbing the language. The Major assists by pointing out letters and simple words. H is for happy. B is for bread. C is for cat. Langet and Ingress watch intently as he teaches the alphabet. The astronaut then holds up an image of someone eating. "Eat," he says in English. They begin exchanging simple gestures and words, gradually learning to communicate. The Major points to himself. "Me," he says, then mimics eating. "Food." He picks up a prop sandwich and teaches the word food again. Higi, catching on quickly, announces, "I think I now understand the logic of your language." The English dictionary has images and words to aid learning. Higi tries to say dictionary, stumbling slightly, but then flips through the book at high speed, scanning everything. The Major watches in awe as the robot processes the language rapidly. Higi taps the book with one arm and says it now understands the basic structure of human grammar. "What would you like to do next?" it asks. The Major responds, "I know how to destroy the meteor and save your planet." He explains that his ship was destroyed so he can't return home. But if they find what's left of the ship, they may be able to stop the meteor. Higi falls silent, looking saddened. Ingress speaks to the robot, asking it to listen to the astronaut's plan. The Major pulls out his science manual and opens to the chemistry chapter, laying it flat to show the periodic table. He begins teaching the elements. Boron, a chemical element. Hydrogen, atomic number 1. Oxygen, atomic number 8. Higi studies the table and says, "Humans organize the elements the same way we do." Surprised, the Major asks, "You understand the periodic table?" Higi then mentions a strange element. Appleton. "Our people discovered this element before any other," he says. He shows a projection. Appleton is a dark matter particle. The Major explains that dark matter reacts only to gravity and cannot be seen. Higi replies, "Science on Boomy cannot yet comprehend dark matter." "That's okay," the Major says. "You don't need to understand it to use it." A memory surfaces. His superior officer once asked if anyone had heard of Appleton particles. No one had. "Since it's classified," the officer said, "I'll explain briefly." He described atoms, electrons. Dark matter particles contain positrons instead. Appleton was the only known dark matter particle, and the engine of the ship, Adelante, ran on it. He clarified it was a full-size model of the engine, but sufficient to understand its inner workings. He called on Maintenance Chief Dong Young-soo to come forward and review the engine. A colleague warned him to remember the symbol near the engine bay. That symbol unlocked the back section. "Follow the steps in the manual," the officer said. Another colleague asked, "What mission is written in the manual?" The response stunned them. "The self-destruct sequence." "But why would we need that?" someone asked. "Because," the officer said gravely, Dark matter is a potential antimatter bomb. He explained that if a planet like Arcadia existed, with intelligent life, they'd be watching. If the species was advanced and posed a threat, their mission was to detonate the engine in the heart of their civilization. The Major realizes now, this was one of his classified missions aboard the Atalante. Hiji confirms it. The engine is a bomb. Ingress turns solemn, clearly worried by the implications. Ingress approaches and speaks softly to the Major. The astronaut hears the word mot, a word he now understands to mean end. He deduces that the phrase might mean to neutralize. Ingress sits beside the robot and asks the Major directly, "What will your choice be now?" The Major answers, "I won't follow those orders. I won't destroy this planet." All three look at him, relieved, hopeful. "I want to find the ship's engine," he says. "Together." Ingress replies, "Then the future of planet Boomi is in all of our hands." Higi then asks, "Why did you share this classified information with us?" The Major answers with honesty, "Because you deserve the truth, and because I want your trust." He extends his hand. "I want to use the power humanity gave me for something greater, to save this world." Langet stares at him, serious and thoughtful. After a long pause, she reaches out and takes his hand. Ingress watches in silence, while Langet nods with conviction. The Major meets her gaze, confident, resolute. His decision made. One of the crew members carefully jots down the instructions, making sure not to miss any crucial details. A woman shows him a communication manual designed for sending messages to Earth. The Major begins drafting a report, following the guide he received earlier. He records a message stating that he's currently inside a room in Bunker 16 on the planet. He reports that his spacesuit is undergoing modifications for exploration. The outer layer will be removed, and he will highlight the parts needing adjustment. He is placed into a specialized machine that delicately removes the suit's outer components. The robot Higi notes that the battery and power system require repairs, and asks if anything else needs attention. The Major inquires whether a respirator will still be necessary for outdoor exploration. Higi suggests integrating the respirator into a Boomian helmet for greater convenience. The Major agrees and turns to Ingress, asking if such a modification is possible. The robot translates Ingress's response, "Absolutely." Higi then asks whether the helmet includes communication functions, as this could allow them to remove the suit's comm system to lighten the load. The little bot also inquires if the water tank is used to regulate body temperature. Without the helmet, the Major begins to feel a throbbing headache due to atmospheric pressure. Higi explains that the planet's air pressure is not the same as Earth's. It's actually twice as high, making adaptation difficult. Higi assures him that with time, his body will adjust. But for now, it will be tough. The Major then points to an orange oxygen tank connected to his suit and asks about its function. The robot explains that it's connected to an oxygen filtration system. Ingress proposes dismantling a machine to build a temporary respirator. They agree to use the makeshift device until his body fully adapts. The Major resumes his recording, noting that the suit modifications should be finished today. He adds that he's been exercising regularly to rebuild the strength he lost in space. The extended period in zero gravity weakened his muscles and bones. He needs to strengthen his body. But there's one big obstacle: proper food. He reports that since his arrival, he's eaten nothing but mushrooms. Although he complains about the bland taste, Ingress insists it's the safest option. He's had them roasted, steamed, boiled, every way imaginable. To his dismay, the planet's inhabitants eat mushrooms exclusively as well. He grows concerned about his long-term health and starts thinking about alternative nutrition sources. As if that weren't enough, he's also undergoing combat training. Their greatest enemy? The Gyarados, monsters that arrive on the planet in cocoon form. He remembers seeing one of them on his very first day. Sadly, Hiji reveals that the war against the Gyarados is already over, and they lost. Determined, the Major insists that if they must fight again, he wants to know how to win. He asks the robot to share everything it knows about the monsters. Hiji explains that to defeat them, their vital organs must be destroyed: brain, heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys. The Major is shocked that their physiology resembles that of vertebrates. The robot confirms it. The Gyarados are, in fact, vertebrates. The Major then looks at an arsenal laid out nearby and asks about the weapons. The bot points to the Naga, a railgun-style weapon, and explains it's the standard armament. Using the Naga is relatively simple, until the Gyarados get too close. At that moment, Langeth steps forward to train him in hand-to-hand combat. Wearing an oxygen mask, she prepares to demonstrate. Her skin reddens, and she transforms into a formidable warrior. Hiji reiterates that the real danger comes when enemies get close. The Earth-made Naga features a rotating drum and can be outfitted with a blade. Langeth, with her red and blue skin, now stands ready to teach him how to fight with it. She explains that to defend against a Gyarados' charge, he must block using their front legs as leverage. With the weapon slung across her shoulders, she demonstrates the correct stance. Hiji adds that, if timed right, the enemy's strength can be turned against them, slicing clean through. The Major watches every move carefully. Langeth calls him to mirror her form and demonstrates a high block. He attempts the pose and asks if he's doing it right. Suddenly, he feels a massive impact, nearly knocking him off balance. Startled, he asks what that was. Hiji explains. In a real encounter, the impact would be even stronger. The Major asks if he's allowed to fight back with some force. Langeth smiles and tells him to use everything he's got. It's a training weapon, Hiji confirms. You can go all out. With renewed confidence, the Major braces himself and launches a full-power strike at Langeth. The bot cheers him on, encouraging him to keep going until the weapon breaks. Their clash begins, blades swinging, weapons colliding. Both wear fierce, focused expressions, locked in the intensity of training. Langeth smiles, clearly enjoying the fight. The Major records that Boomians gain strength in combat through stimulants. Later, he prepares for his first real expedition, skimming through the communication manual. According to the guide, one way to send messages back to Earth is by recording music. This reminds him of the Voyager Golden Record, which carried Earth's culture, Bach, Beethoven, and folk songs from around the world. He only knows how to play rock, but he'll give it a try. He strums his guitar and sings a familiar tune, imagining a concert crowd. Langeth watches, smiling. You really did it. You played for me. She mentions that the local press is curious about his clothing and music. Mid-song, the Major forgets the lyrics and has to improvise. Langeth calls him over to let him know that the modified spacesuit is ready. He nods and stands, eager to see the final result. They walk side by side down the corridor toward the suit prep room. He slips his device into his pocket as they go. Ingress waves him over. The suit is ready, she says. The Major approaches and activates the system, watching as the suit loads diagnostics onto his device. He smiles. Everything is functioning perfectly. He steps into the suit and is hoisted by chains for final calibration. The armor emits bursts of steam from its joints, signaling it's powered and operational. Ingress performs the final welds to secure the armor. The Major watches with pride, satisfied by the team's collaboration. This was a team victory, he says. Ingress asks him to try on the helmet to test the airflow. He puts it on and breathes deeply, fogging the visor. Everything works. Fully suited, the Major is now ready for his first mission. In a field of red flowers, he spots several Gyritas near the wreckage of his ship. Through the scope of his weapon, he takes aim from a distance. Confirming multiple targets, he prepares to engage. By his side, Langeth stands poised for battle in the crimson field. His finger hovers on the trigger. 3, 2, 1. He fires, direct hit, taking down distracted Gyritas. Gathered with his new allies, the Major briefs them on the next phase of the mission. Using a holographic map, he shows the crash sites they need to investigate. Their first objective is the coastal radar base, designed to monitor falling objects like meteors. To gather more intel, they'll need to visit the satellite communications base in the mountains, possibly the last location to track the ship Atalante before the crash. After reviewing both options, Ingress decides, we'll head to the coastal base first. And just like that, the expedition begins. The Major suggests searching for ship debris on the way to the radar base. He explains that they might come across useful items from the spaceship's wreckage. Curious, Langeth asks what kind of Earth items they could possibly find. The astronaut answers that they might discover weapons, food, seeds, and other valuable supplies. Langeth grows thoughtful and asks, with a playful smile, if they have cat seeds, maybe they could plant some on Boomy. The robot Hiji then checks in, asking if the luggage has been loaded and whether the Major's blood sample has been collected. The Major confirms that his blood has been refrigerated and stored in the vehicle for emergencies. The little bot reminds him that if he's injured, there's no other Earthling around to help. Hiji urges the team to be cautious and return safely from their expedition. Langeth smiles, energized by the mission ahead. Ingress, too, stands ready to support the team in any way necessary. With his new helmet secured, the Major takes the lead. Back in the flower field, he kneels and locks onto several garitas, roaming nearby. Taking aim, he prepares to clear a path forward. He begins a countdown and warns his companions to get ready. From atop an armored vehicle, he takes careful aim with his naga weapon. Beside him, Lenget, helmet on, prepares for close-range combat should the creatures charge. At 3, the Major fires. A sharp red beam shoots from his weapon and pierces through the air, striking one of the garitas clean in the head. The shot is precise. The beam punches through the creature's skull effortlessly. Purple liquid gushes as the monster thrashes in agony. The other garitas, enraged, roar with their enormous mouths and charge at the group. The Major jumps down from the vehicle, ready for a close-quarters fight. The beasts storm toward them, their fury boiling. He grips his weapon tightly and braces himself. "Should we fire now?" he calls out as the monsters close in. Ingress shouts to Langet, "Now!" Langet nods and readies her stance, weapon in hand. She fires rapidly, her shots striking the garitas with deadly precision. Despite the hits, the monsters continue their assault. One leaps through the air, claws outstretched, aiming to strike the Major from above. He recalls his training and raises his weapon to block the incoming attack. The monster draws closer, faster with every heartbeat. Suddenly, Langet, her red skin glowing, smoke billowing from her mask, leaps into action. With a powerful swing of her naga, she intercepts the garita midair and slices it clean in two. Purple liquid splatters across the ground as the beast crashes to the earth. Breathing heavily, Langet exhales a burst of blue vapor and locks eyes with the Major. Stunned, he stares at her in awe. "That one was mine," he says, half joking. She gives a sheepish smile and offers a quick gesture of apology. Ingress approaches and reminds her that they had agreed the Major would take down one monster himself. Langet lowers her head slightly, apologizing for letting the moment get to her. Ingress then tells the Major to move on ahead and begin searching the wreckage. They'll follow shortly. He agrees and proceeds alone toward the crash site. As he walks away, he hears Ingress scolding Langet in the background. Reaching the wreckage, the Major discovers a storage compartment and climbs inside. He recalls that the black box should be near the ship's hatch. Digging through the debris, he sifts through crates and panels. Eventually, he finds an emergency voice recorder mounted on a wall. He punches through the glass cover and grabs it, pressing play to hear its final message. What he hears leaves him speechless. Clutching the recorder, he sits down, trying to process what he just heard. A memory floods back, an urgent moment from his past. A robot insisted that crew survival was the top mission priority. A man, Dean, was shouting that without certain equipment, Chief Young-soo wouldn't make it. The voice was unmistakably Dean's, speaking to a robot named Aleph. Could Dean have helped him escape and survive the crash? Aleph's protocol ordered the crew to return to the escape pods immediately. Furious, Dean cut off the conversation and prepared to disobey. The Major listens, stunned by what he's uncovering. He wonders how far Dean managed to go, and whether he saved others. Did he also save the Major's guitar? Determined, he begins checking opened containers, hoping to find answers. Langet approaches and offers to help. He nods and asks her to catch any items he throws down. One by one, he tosses boxes of supplies from above, and she catches them below. "Find anything useful?" she asks. He jumps down to show her the ship's black box, some salvageable weapons, and several personal items, including a journal with Dean Daniels' name on the cover. He tells Langet to rest while he sifts through the contents. Back inside the vehicle, the Major watches the boomy sunset, reading Dean's journal. The entries are filled with reflections on music and unity. A flashback surfaces, a young Dean in his U.S. Air Force uniform. In another memory, a superior calls out to Lieutenant Dong Young-soo for a private meeting. The young soldier salutes with crisp formality. The officer, wearing a winter coat, dismisses his assistant and introduces himself. In the present, the Major and Langet sit quietly in the vehicle, the sky painted with orange light. She peers over curiously, asking what he's reading so intently. "It's Dean's journal," he replies, flipping to a page. He reads aloud. Dean recalls meeting the Major on a flight and assuming they were equals, until he found out otherwise. He jokingly called him rude for not saying he was his superior. The Major goes quiet, processing the memory. Langet huffs at the story. "He sounds irritating," she says with a smirk, then asks to see the other items he found. Another memory surfaces, a high-level meeting. His superior, still in the winter coat, formally begins the conversation. The assistant introduces himself as Alex Chung, now working at Exploration HQ. The superior introduces himself as Connor Callahan, "A personnel officer from Joint Headquarters." The young soldier replies that he serves as a logistics officer for the 23rd Space Brigade. Wasting no time, the interview begins. "What made you enlist?" Connor asks. "To protect the citizens," the young man answers confidently. Connor raises an eyebrow. "Did you write that yourself?" The soldier smiles. "I believe I did." The questioning continues. Why did he want to join the exploration mission? "To find a new and different world," he replies. Connor flips through the application. "Did you use a chatbot for these answers?" he asks, half skeptical. The major chuckles, unsure if it was a compliment or a jab. But for now, there are more pressing matters: survival, discovery, and a planet that might still be saved. The superior asks the young soldier to be honest during the interview, stressing its importance. The assistant adds that the session also serves to assess his psychological state and encourages him to share his true thoughts freely. The young man nods and agrees to speak truthfully, ready to answer once more. He reveals that he enlisted to pay for college and to gain American citizenship. He accepted the exploration mission because he genuinely wanted to see another world. He believed his combat experience would be useful for the mission. The superior then asks if it had been hard to afford college after losing his family. The soldier responds with a solemn expression, confirming that it had been extremely difficult. The superior continues, asking how he felt during that challenging time. The young man replies that he was broke and overwhelmed, constantly worrying about paying for his boarding house. Then, the superior accuses him of getting involved with a rough crowd to make quick money. Shocked, the soldier demands to know how they learned that. The superior calmly explains that they interviewed people close to him to gather background information. The young man admits he sold phones and electronics, but insists he never threatened or robbed anyone. He says he left that life behind once he started living with the Martinez family. A file is shown displaying a photo of Maria Martinez, who sadly passed away in 2062. The superior shifts the topic and asks about his mission in Kazakhstan. The assistant commends the soldier, noting how well he handled a surprise attack. The superior then prompts him to elaborate on his combat experience during that mission. He explains that the mission was to retrieve a meteorite that had crashed in the desert. The meteorite was valued at $60 million, which led to an armed group ambushing them. He had driven the transport truck as bait, luring the enemies towards support forces. The superior says he already heard the story from Alex, but notes that Alex told it in a much more dramatic fashion. He remarks that the soldier rose to officer status afterward and seems to thrive under pressure. The young man replies that facing major events gives him the courage to tackle new challenges. The superior leans in, asking whether these challenges are simply a way of escaping from past trauma. The soldier falls silent, his expression serious and unreadable. "You're lucky," the superior says, his voice cool. "You seem like someone who's always running away. Your parents died, you enlisted. Friends gone, you became an officer. Now, you're fleeing Earth." The young man quietly admits that there were many moments when he wanted to give up. But in hard times, he says, a person either falls apart or endures. And either way, those are the only choices. He believes that if you choose not to give up, if you endure long enough, things eventually improve. The superior glances at the file and reveals that the beneficiary of his pension is Camilo Martinez. He then asks the soldier to confirm the address and contact details on the form. He explains that all mission details are classified and will be recorded as a military mobilization. Holding the document, the young man asks with surprise, "So, did I pass the interview?" The superior apologizes for the harsh questions, but affirms that they were necessary. Without hesitation, the assistant hands over a sealed folder marked Project Arcadia. Inside, the young man learns that the mission is officially named Mission Arcadia. The superior instructs him to read the documents carefully. He explains that the young man will serve as head of Maintenance Section 1 on the ship. Upon arrival at mission headquarters, he will be promoted to major. Until then, however, he is still a candidate and must focus on his training. Surprised, the soldier remarks that he assumed someone with astronaut experience would be chosen. The assistant explains that the journey will be done in hibernation. What they needed was someone with other practical skills. The superior adds that his combat background gave him a unique edge. As the interview ends, the superior informs him that his belongings have already been moved to the transport. They shake hands, exchanging well wishes for the success of the mission. As he reaches the door, the superior turns back and asks, "Do you drink or smoke?" The soldier replies that he quit drinking and only smokes occasionally after training. The superior smirks. "Then we have time for one last cigarette before you leave." The lieutenant salutes and the two men exit the room. A guard approaches, calling him by his full name and preparing to escort him. Two armed soldiers in yellow uniforms arrive to take him to the transport. The young man walks with the guards toward a snowy landing strip, where a private plane waits. As they trudge through the snow, one of the guards watches him closely. The guard then offers him a cigarette. The young man politely declines. "It's all right, I don't need one." But the guard insists, saying the personnel officer wanted him to deliver a message. "This will be your last cigarette for the rest of your life." Stunned, the young man accepts the cigarette, and the guard lights it for him. He looks up at the gray sky and exhales smoke, pondering the message. Looking at the plane, he mutters that it's unusually cold for July. Snow continues to fall as the plane stares lower for boarding. With luggage in hand, he steps aboard, ready for the journey ahead. There's a small smile on his face, an expression of quiet confidence. Inside the aircraft, a guitar case rests against a seat, adorned with a lightning bolt sticker. Someone calls out, "Hey, musician!" The lieutenant turns, confused by the nickname. A man grins at him and introduces himself as Dean Daniels, saying they'll be working together since they're both lieutenants. The protagonist notes silently that Dean is actually his subordinate on the mission. In a brief memory flash, the young soldier recalls a restricted zone. Inside a room, he meets the other crew members and a young blonde woman. Dean looks surprised, eyeing him curiously. The soldier is introduced to the group as Major Dong Young-soo, head of maintenance. The camera lingers on the new insignia on his shoulder, marking his rank. Stunned by the promotion, Dean quickly salutes his superior. Suddenly, the scene shifts. In a snowy field, a strange plant grows through the grass. A giraffe appears and begins eating it calmly. The camera pulls back, revealing a ruined city and a person lying motionless on the ground. The giraffe lifts its head, and in the sky, dozens of rockets launch into space. The creature keeps chewing as the rockets streak through the air behind it. The view changes again, to a colossal launch base filled with rows of towering rockets. Back in the present, the major walks through a corridor carrying a cardboard box. He sets it on a table, and cold vapor seeps out from within. Dean greets him again with a crisp salute. "Pleasure to finally meet you, sir." The major steps to a podium, preparing to hold the team's first official briefing. He gestures for everyone to sit together, no empty gaps. Then, he instructs them to raise their right hands and begin counting off. The blonde woman says, 1. The man next to her follows with 2. When Dean says 4, the major walks over and introduces him as the deputy chief. Dean grins. "So you were the guy sitting next to me on the plane." The major nods and assigns him to distribute the briefing folders. Dean obliges without complaint, handing the blue folders out to the crew. The count continues. Another soldier calls out, 5. Dean reports that, including the section chief, they total 32 personnel. The major thanks him, then begins the mission briefing. He explains that training will last at least 1 year, and anyone who fails will be dismissed from the mission. This is a joint operation, and all mission information is top secret. He warns that, if anything leaks, the CIA will conduct a full investigation. Dean, now more serious, nods at the gravity of the warning. The major states that Earth is already collapsing, and since everyone knows that, there's no point in hiding it. He adds that the team will undergo a physical exam the next morning. As it includes an endoscopy, they must begin fasting after 9 p.m. With a focused look, he announces that the real training begins the day after tomorrow. Dean opens his blue folder and reveals that the first phase is physical conditioning. The goal is to prepare their bodies for hibernation, developing enough muscle mass and body fat to survive extended space travel. During a training session, the major encourages Dean to finish one more rep of a heavy squat, pushing the crew to be stronger, faster, and ready for the unknown. After the workout, the major congratulates Dean and says they're now heading to the theory class. Tired and dripping with sweat, the protagonist mutters that he still has one more set of exercises to do. He turns to his friend and asks if they haven't already completed the 10 sets for the day. But Dean corrects him, reminding him that as the chief, he still has to finish the final round. With a serious expression, Dean adds, "You can't skip leg day." Back in the classroom, the major announces that the next lesson is on understanding the ship Atalante. An instructor enters and begins the lecture in front of a blackboard. She warns that there will be a test after every class. The major looks disheartened by the news. Trying to stay focused, he concentrates as best he can while Dean, already sharp and attentive, jots down answers rapidly. The major leans over and whispers, asking Dean what the answer to question number 3 is. Dean simply points at his own test and gestures for him to figure it out himself. With a confused look, The major mutters that he can't even read the question number. The instructor catches him and glares in disapproval at the attempted cheating. After the theory session, the major announces that the team will begin practical training. Dean explains that this next phase takes place in a full-scale replica of the ship Atalante. The major adds that it includes mission simulations involving scientific experiments in space. The next module prepares them for their eventual arrival on the alien planet. It begins with terraforming exercises, like growing potatoes and beans. With a grin, Dean proudly shows off the huge harvest of potatoes he's managed to produce. The major groans, saying it's exhausting to keep crouching down to dig them up. Sitting on the floor, he wonders aloud why coffee cultivation wasn't part of the mission curriculum. They also begin learning how to operate the specialized spacesuit designed for the mission. While the suit retains basic functions like humidity control, it includes an exoskeleton system optimized for use on the planet's surface. He explains that it's essentially power armor, like something out of a sci-fi movie. They practice combat and emergency procedures in the suits to get fully accustomed to them. During one combat session, the major pulls Dean aside to share an idea. He asks whether using a 60mm mortar could let them skip some of the more tedious training. Dean chuckles but raises a good point. Aren't explosives banned from the spaceship? Unfortunately, an instructor overhears them and demands the name of the officer who mentioned mortars. Because of the suggestion, they both receive point deductions in their evaluation. With a sarcastic tone, the instructor remarks that even Laika, the space dog, would understand space travel better than them. Puzzled, the major turns to ask who this Laika person was. Dean explains that Laika was a Soviet dog who went to space, leaving the major slightly embarrassed. Dean then says he's worried about the chief's score after that blunder and suggests they study more after training. The major doesn't look thrilled by the idea. Later, now in uniform, the major announces that the next training module will cover hibernation procedures. He warns that it's a risky exercise, so everyone must sign a consent form. Snapping his fingers, he says, "There's one more thing to show them." He unveils a robot that will follow them around to collect data. It's the Aleph version 1, a machine with a red, camera-like eye. He explains that Aleph is the artificial intelligence of the Battleant spaceship, designed to support their mission. To finish, the major asks everyone to retrieve their cell phones one by one. A young man steps forward and introduces himself as Ryan Curtis to collect his device. Dean offers to help check names on the list, and the section chief accepts. Soon after, a Marine introduces himself as Chase Bennington, and the major greets him warmly. Next, the blonde woman introduces herself as Jocelyn Yates and asks where the cafeteria is. The robot Aleph responds that it will guide her, and the major tells her to follow the small machine. She agrees and follows Aleph down the hallway toward the base's cafeteria. Dean then apologizes for not recognizing the major on the plane earlier. With a friendly smile, the major waves it off, telling him not to worry. Dean offers a handshake. With a determined look, he promises to support his new leader all the way to the mission's end. The astronaut accepts with a slight smile, and the two shake hands, ready to give their all. The scene cuts to the robot Aleph reading Dean's journal, which reflects on their first day of training. Back in the present, the major thinks about how Dean kept that promise until the very end. He turns around and sees Langet asleep on the ground. He asks why she's sleeping out here and tells her to move to the car where it's warmer. Langet wakes up a little sheepish and agrees to change spots. Ingrid asks if anything unusual is going on outside. The major responds that everything's quiet. His blue-skinned friend says he's turning in for the night, and the major decides to rest as well. From the vehicle, Langet wishes the man on watch a good night's rest. A memory of Den surfaces. He laughs and says how much fun it was being with the rock star. Holding his helmet, the major whispers a farewell. "Rest in peace, my friend." The next morning, a hot air balloon floats above a vast field of red flowers. The small robot uses it as a radio station, calling out, "If anyone can hear my voice, please respond." "Is everyone awake?" the robot asks. Langet replies that she was already on watch. The curious bot asks about the others, and Langet says she'll check. A voice comes through the radio saying, "I'm awake." The robot then asks, "Who just spoke?" With a solemn look, it realizes there's still one person left to wake up. Suddenly, the robot shouts the major's name at the top of its lungs, startling him awake. The sudden scream shocks not only the major, but also Ingress, who clutches his chest. With smug pride, the robot says that since everyone is now awake, the test can begin. Langet is the first to take a turn, translating a sentence into English. The robot praises her for getting it right. With a triumphant smile, the blue-skinned woman celebrates her success. Next up is Ingress, who translates a phrase as recognition and also passes. When it's the Major's turn, the little robot selects a particularly hard sentence for him. Still groggy, the Major thinks he must have misheard, but the robot insists he proceed. It explains that knowing how to communicate with humans is essential for conversation. Using his translator implant, the Major tries to process the phrase, but it's too complex. He gives up. The robot sighs and offers a simpler phrase in the Boomy language instead. The Major incorrectly translates it as, "I don't work." The robot laughs and says the correct translation is, "You're a dummy." Ingray, chuckling, asks if they can go back to sleep now that the test is over. The hot air balloon begins to ascend, lifting them far from their previous location. Though the balloon seems to lose a bit of air, it keeps flying toward its destination. Inside, the group eats while gazing over the striking red landscapes of planet Boomy. Munching on a strange rock, the Major asks Ingress when they'll arrive. Langet stares at the astronaut, still chewing on the stone, and then bursts into laughter, mocking him by repeating the phrase from the test. Ingress replies that they should arrive around sunset. The Major slumps slightly and repeats the phrase to himself, looking deflated. Langet laughs even harder, while Ingress watches him with concern. Once the balloon lands, its rope is untied from a stake in the ground. The Major helps pack the balloon as they prepare to continue their journey. With a serious tone, Ingress tells the group it's time to move out. Their armored vehicle begins to race across the red fields. Inside, Langet silently watches the landscape through the small window. The Major, helmet on, inspects a white rifle, sleek and lethal in design. While driving, Ingress asks about the condition of the weapons they recovered. The astronaut replies that they appear functional but need batteries for testing. Curious, Ingray asks what kind of weapons they are. They're railguns, the Major explains. Smaller caliber but faster fire rate. Ingress nods, impressed, especially with the plasma cutter they found. Smiling, he asks the Major if he plans to modify anything with it. The astronaut shrugs, saying he was only supposed to bring a guitar. Then he finds a manga and comments that someone from the crew must have brought it. He asks if Langet found it. She confirms, saying she found the comic book interesting. He asks if she read it late at night and why she didn't understand it. She replies, "What does it say?" He explains that it's written in Japanese, one of Earth's many languages. The story, he says, is about girls eating sweets at school. Langet, puzzled, asks what a school is. He tells her it's a place where children go to learn new things. She says she learned everything from Ingress and Hiji, having spent her whole life in a bunker. With a dreamy expression, Langet says the book made her want to go to school. The Major comments that even without understanding the words, he can still feel the joy radiating from the pictures. He reflects on how much she must have longed to play with friends and finds her situation deeply sad. Imagining what she'd be like in school, he thinks she'd make a great student, especially with how well taught she is. He pictures her as a model student, wearing glasses, but also wonders if she could have turned out differently. Another thought bubble pops up. This time, she's a rebellious delinquent, bossing around some poor guy to dig up mushrooms for her, for free. Snapping back to reality, he chuckles, realizing that both versions he imagined are a bit far-fetched. The blue-skinned woman then asks curiously if he also went to school and whether it was fun. With a distant gaze, the astronaut quietly replies that yes, he did go to school. A flashback plays. He's younger, wearing a mask and yelling furiously. In the next moment, his face is bruised, blood dripping from his nose as he wipes it with a trembling hand. He presses a cloth to a gash on his leg, trying to stop the bleeding. An older man appears with a first aid kit, his hands sweating as he treats the wound. The young man winces, eyes filled with pain and fear. In a car, he stares out the window with blood still on his lip, lost in thought. The memory shifts to a girl with cat ear headphones, surrounded by raging flames. The reflection of fire glows in his eyes, sweat rolling down his face. Another memory follows. He's holding hands with a girl in a cemetery as rain pours around them. Their fingers remain interlocked, his shirt soaked, his expression blank and lost. Back in the present, the astronaut finally says with a heavy tone, "School was a good place." But then he admits it wasn't all that fun for him, not like it was for most. He calls Langet's name and she looks up with gentle curiosity. He shows her the comic book and points to a character that resembles her. The character's name is Amin, which he believes roughly means sound of the sky. With a smile, she notes how similar that is to the meaning of her own name. She asks if he'll read the comic to her later, and he jokes that he'll need to study Japanese first. Then, noticing something about the cat-loving character, Langet lights up with excitement. She pulls out a small hand-carved sculpture she made herself. The astronaut takes it and smiles, saying it's adorable. He recognizes the figure and remarks, "This must be the Bala Aya." Finally, the armored vehicle reaches its destination. A massive coastal base looms ahead. The group steps out of the vehicle, and Ingress announces that they've arrived. He gestures toward an island in the distance, explaining it's the low-altitude air defense base. The Major quickly notices something's off. The bridge leading to the island is completely destroyed. He asks in surprise if the connecting bridge is broken. Ingress explains that it's currently high tide, which is why the path is submerged. He assures them the path will be visible again once the tide recedes around dawn. With no other option, the group decides to wait and perform equipment maintenance in the meantime. Walking along a catwalk, the Major and Ingress inspect the base's machinery. The astronaut asks what caused the bridge's destruction. Ingress, holding a folder, says it was likely due to a meteor impact. He notes that the air defense system meant to intercept meteors was completely disabled. Luckily, he adds, the emergency power system at the base is still functioning. The Major hopes they can retrieve useful data from the site. High above, the communication balloon floats over the red flower fields and the coastal facility. Ingress says it's time to report their status to Hiji, the small robot back at HQ. Langet activates the communicator and calls out, asking if the machine can hear her. Hiji responds and asks about the condition of the radar base. Langet explains they've reached the checkpoint, but that much of the base is heavily damaged. The robot ends the call with a warning, "Be very careful." Langet heads into the base to check on the power situation. She asks about the gorillas, and Ingress says he hasn't detected any nearby. Still, with a concerned look, he admits he can sense their presence faintly, perhaps weakened by the cloudy weather. Suddenly, it starts to rain. The Major steps onto the wet grass and calls for everyone to take shelter. As night falls, the base is fully submerged, battered by relentless rain and waves. From inside the vehicle, the Major watches the storm, waiting for the tide to recede. Ingress studies a map and explains they're right by the broken bridge. Once the tide lowers at dawn, they can move across. The Major asks about the gorillas again. Ingress says the pheromone traces seem old, but warns that doesn't mean the coast is clear. "Do you think there could be monsters on the island?" the Major asks. Ingress isn't sure. Langet returns and announces she found food in the storage room, combat rations. She displays the rations proudly. Ingress chuckles, saying they bring back old memories, and asks how the room looked. Langet replies that it was a mess, and she also sensed faint Garida's pheromones there. The Major asks if the creatures could access the storage room. Ingress suggests it might have been a variant, but reassures them that there's no immediate threat. The Major tries to eat the ration, but finds it bland. Ingress advises mixing it with warm water. The scene shifts to a lit fireplace, where the group gathers for warmth and food. Ingress asks if the ration is edible. Langet, tasting it, smiles, and says it's nice to eat something that isn't mushrooms. She genuinely enjoys the new flavor. The Major agrees, saying the ration tastes better with mushroom crackers. Ingress tells him to get some rest. They need to be up before sunrise. Outside, the rain pours harder. The night feels thick with danger. At dawn, Ingress checks Langet's weapon. She confirms it's ready. The Major also prepares his gear, saying his weapon is combat ready. With everyone set, Ingress gives the order to move out. The armored vehicle drives toward the previously submerged bridge. Its headlights cut through the misty darkness as the car rolls slowly onto the damp path. The astronaut eyes the structure nervously, hoping it doesn't collapse under them. He asks Ingress if the monsters or pheromones can be detected, but the storm is interfering. Suddenly, Langet shouts, a warning. There's an obstacle ahead. The Major asks if they can detour through the mud, but Ingress says they'll have to clear it. He instructs Langet to man the top turret. They exit the vehicle to begin clearing the path. Working together with shovels and sledgehammers, they attack the debris. The Major questions whether the rocks fell from the bridge, but Ingress interrupts and tells him to look ahead. Through the downpour, a shadowy figure emerges in the distance. Multiple enemies behind us, Ingress warns. We need backup. Langet reports that a swarm of smaller Garadavarians is rapidly approaching. She opens fire from the turret, holding back the advancing monsters. The Major calls out that he'll finish clearing the debris and asks for rear cover. Rain pounding his helmet, he works furiously. "I'm soaked. I feel like I could die out here," he shouts. The Garidas keep coming. One leaps over the rubble, straight toward him. Just as it's about to strike, red beams slice through the air and knock it away. "Ingress!" the Major hears him shout. "Get back to the vehicle, now!" With sledgehammer slung over his shoulder, The Major sprints back toward the car, monsters in pursuit. He climbs up with Ingris's help just in time. Once on the roof, he yells, "More enemies coming from the front." A full horde is charging at them without hesitation. Acting on instinct, the astronaut jumps down and smashes one of the beasts with his sledgehammer. Blood stains his hands, purple and alien. "What's going on with this bridge?" he shouts. Suddenly, a bright light flashes at the far end of the structure. In the distance, a mysterious figure stands on the bridge, motionless, backlit by the glow. Another flash, rhythmic this time, like a coded signal. The Major squints, trying to understand, then he hears it, a sequence of beeps. Morse code. "Ingris," he calls. "What is that?" "Langet," Ingris replies urgently. "Tune the radio to 70 megahertz." Langet spins the dial. The Major hears Ingris shout, "Open the side ear protection on your helmet, now!" The blue-skinned woman steps forward and adjusts the Major's helmet. She gently turns a dial. But at first, all they hear is harsh static. Slowly, the signal clears, and a few distorted words begin to emerge through the noise. The light on the bridge blinks again, this time completing the message with the words personnel and Adelante. A voice cuts through, crackling. The sound quality is poor, and it says it will repeat the message. The Major, raising his voice, shouts that he can hear and tells the mysterious figure to keep talking. With glowing red eyes, the figure responds, asking if they are indeed crew members of the spaceship Adelante. Holding a weapon at the ready, the robot demands they state their affiliation, name, and call sign. From the bridge, the machine repeats the request, awaiting proper identification. The astronaut responds firmly, "Major Dong Young-soo, maintenance team, call sign, Rockstar." The robot confirms his identity and asks for further instructions. Recognizing the machine, the Major realizes it's Aleph and immediately requests fire support in the ongoing battle. The machine acknowledges and asks if the creatures should be classified as enemies. Without hesitation, the Major yells, "Yes! Eliminate them now!" Targeting the monsters, the robot begins to power up its weapon. Side panels on its weapon system open, and Aleph announces, "Opening heatsink." A blinding energy beam fires from the bridge, slamming into a Girita, obliterating it in a brilliant explosion right in front of their vehicle. The astronaut cheers at the perfect shot and announces their next move. They'll breach the fortress at 3 o'clock. He then asks if the robot knows the location they're heading to. The machine confirms. The coordinates are recognized. It knows the exact route. The Major requests weapon batteries, and the robot asks for the specific types. 2 Odette batteries and 1 Aurora, the soldier replies. The machine confirms and asks if it should deliver them to the entrance passage. The Major affirms, saying he'll meet Aleph at the designated location. Langet asks if the robot is an ally, and the Major confirms it's the AI from the Adelante. He shouts over the chaos, "It's going to help us at the fortress entrance." The machine announces its imminent arrival and requests information about the enemy. The soldier replies, "The monsters are called Gyridas. Their structure is vertebrate-based. They come in both small and large variants." "Confirmed," the robot responds. The Major steadies himself for the final fight on the bridge. Suddenly, a Girita clamps its jaws around his sledgehammer, locking him in place. With a scowl, the astronaut groans, "This is driving me insane." The monster throws him back with tremendous force, claws slashing wildly. Langud screams his name as he's pulled off the vehicle. She lunges forward, grabs his leg, and with all her strength, hauls him back onto the car. Breathing heavily, his face exposed, the Major thanks her for saving him. Ingris yells, "Hold on tight," as he makes a hard turn. With monsters closing in, the Major calls out to Aleph, saying they're almost at the base entrance. Through its scope, the robot watches the vehicle racing toward it. It responds, "Weapons will be delivered upon arrival." Aleph then instructs the Major to approach for biometric registration. Ingris tells him to retrieve the weapons. He and Langud will hold off the monsters. Removing his helmet, the Major approaches. A red beam scans his iris. "Scan complete," announces Aleph. It hands over the weapon, listing its serial number, a detail the Major finds oddly formal under the circumstances. "Protocol takes precedence," the robot states calmly, standing beside him. "My primary directive is to protect the crew's lives above all." Then it adds, "According to Arcadia Mission Protocol, all hostile entities will now be neutralized." With that, the robot leaps into action, drawing its blade. It lands amidst the Gyridas and unleashes its full combat capability. In a blur of motion, Aleph slashes through the creatures, decimating them with surgical precision. But more keep coming. The bridge is a battlefield with no end in sight. Armed with a new weapon, the Major remarks that the enemy's assault is starting to slow. From atop a dead Girida, Aleph advises the soldier to retreat to a safer location. It promises to catch up once the threat is contained. The Major tells the robot not to overdo it and to fall back when the time is right. At the fortress gate, Langud and Ingress are waiting, ready to provide cover. Ingress spots the Major approaching and calls out in surprise. Waving, the soldier announces that Aleph will join them shortly in battle. Ingress asks if he means that robot, and the Major confirms. It's the same AI from the Atalante, designed to support both onboard and ground operations. Caked in blood and grime, Aleph stands atop a heap of fallen Giridas. Its strength is undeniable, but more creatures appear in the shadows. Suddenly, a massive Girida lunges at it from behind. Without even turning, Aleph reacts, cutting the beast in half with a single blow. Purple fluid splatters across its face. Visible damage mars its body. Gazing toward the base, the Major declares, "Our backup is finally here." Ingress grips the lever, preparing to close the gate the moment the robot is safely inside. "Is it here yet?" the soldier asks urgently. A bright light fills the tunnel, and Aleph speeds toward them. "I've weakened the enemy assault," it announces, stumbling slightly. Holding a hand to its mouth, the machine seems to falter, its systems strained from battle. The Major congratulates it, and Aleph asks about the two aliens. He confirms, "They're my comrades, Langud and Ingress. They're Boomians." The robot then asks the Major to act as its translator. "What do you want to say?" he asks. But before he can finish, Aleph suddenly points its blade at Ingress. Tension spikes. Ingress immediately raises his weapon. The Major shouts for Aleph to lower the blade, but the robot insists. He must translate the message. Aleph asks flatly, "Was it your species that destroyed the Atalante?" The astronaut is stunned by the question. Unaware of its weight, Ingress casually confirms, "Yes." The Major tries to ease the moment. "Aleph, this is Ingress. He's my friend. The AI just wants to ask a question." Still tense, Ingress keeps his weapon drawn. The robot repeats the question, but the Major realizes Ingress no longer needs a translation. Ingress nods solemnly. "Yes, my species destroyed the Atalante." Langud, weapon raised, glares at the robot. Aleph issues a warning. "If I lose control of my weapon systems now, the entity in front of me will be irreparably damaged." Ingress remains silent. The Major steps in. "Aleph, lower your weapon. That's an order." But Ingress calmly says, "It's his right. Let the machine ask what it wants." Aleph speaks. "Why didn't your people try to establish contact with the Atalante?" Ingress replies, "We didn't order the attack." "Then who did?" the robot demands. "Maybe others. Maybe the satellite system made the call." Aleph presses on. "Do you have no contact with them?" Destroying a ship is a major decision. Ingress answers, "Contacting them, in our current situation, is a death sentence." The Major, watching carefully, notices something. Ingress is speaking flawless human language, pronunciation perfect. He must have practiced this moment for a long time. And then, Ingress adds solemnly, "Long ago, the Giridas were just wild, ferocious animals." He continues, saying there was at least a silver lining to the attacks from those terrifying monsters. To fight back, an order known as the Korok was formed to protect the people. Ingress explains that, because of the ongoing threat, they worked tirelessly to advance their technology. With a symbolic gesture, a soldier hurls his sword into the sky, an emblem of all they've achieved. The blade arcs high into the blue, gleaming with strength and brilliance. He reveals that, with the help of a satellite, they discovered the Giridas came from meteors. The monsters they had once mistaken for mere animals were actually invaders from beyond the stars. Shocked by this revelation, the nations of Bumi united to form a planetary cooperation system. Together, they constructed a defense network designed to intercept incoming meteors. But one day, a colossal planet-killing meteor was detected heading directly for Bumi. On the screens, they watched helplessly as the object drew closer and closer. The Great Assembly of Bumi made a fateful decision: evacuate to a new world and start over. It was then that the true conflict began. Those in power, the chosen elites, declared they would leave first on a pioneering mission. The unchosen revolted in fury, unwilling to be left behind. Civil war erupted, plunging the planet into chaos and bloodshed. Ingress recalls that some of them fought bravely to the very end. Despite having allies they could trust, the situation became impossibly dire. He recounts how one of his closest comrades fell into shock amidst the carnage. On her knees, she realized all her friends had perished in battle, and with one final desperate blow, she too was defeated. To protect what mattered most, a memory flashes of a man holding a crying infant in his arms. The child screamed as he cradled it close, vowing to shield it from harm at all costs. Listening intently, the blue-skinned woman reflects on the story, her own past, her expression heavy with sorrow. Ingress finishes, his eyes steeled with determination. He had to survive. For the child. The machine then asks why he accepted the Major, given that his species was once an enemy. Ingress replies that the Majors had claimed they could destroy the meteor using their ship's engine. For that reason, he says, the astronaut is now their only hope. The machine questions whether they can be trusted, and Ingress answers yes, based on their actions and words. But the AI remains skeptical, stating that's not a precise metric for trust. The astronaut interjects, asking the robot to imagine if it were completely alone, trusting no one. Would it even have been able to begin solving the crisis they face now? He continues, I would have ended up digging for potatoes until the meteor wiped me out. To begin trusting something, he says, you just have to start. Finally, the machine processes his words and says it understands and agrees. Ingress justifies his prior behavior, saying he had to verify their identity in accordance with protocol. With the tension easing, the robot announces it will lower the alert level for the Boomians. Ingress breathes a deep sigh of relief now that the standoff is over. The robot then turns to the Major and asks his mission objective at the base. The astronaut explains that the base controls satellite communications, and he needs access to locate the ship. The machine warns that the Gyridas scale the island during high tide, urging them to move quickly. The Major agrees and prepares to head to the control center with his team. Weapons in hand, Langet and Ingress ready themselves for the task ahead. The group forms up, determined, and begins their approach. Ingress points down a corridor, stating that it leads to the command tower. The Major warns that the Gyridas' pheromones are nearby. Combat is imminent. In the dark hallway, a small Gyrida lunges, but the Major reacts instantly, firing a precise shot that takes it down. He asks if the creature is the same species. It looks different from the others. Langet explains that these Gyridas are in an earlier stage of development. She shows a diagram and says, the more they evolve, the larger and deadlier they become. So, these are less evolved? The Major asks. Langet smacks him on the head and corrects, less developed. He wonders how the monsters coordinated an attack when the rain was supposed to block their pheromones. Langet theorizes they may have used bioelectric signals. And when he asks if that means radio, she explains some Gyridas can indeed generate bioelectricity, making that likely. As they advance, the Major concludes that the debris blocking their path must have been moved on a monster's command. He asks Aleph if it has ever encountered a Gyrida with a different form before. Suddenly, Langet halts the group. Wait, I sense strong pheromones nearby. The Major scans the corridor. No monsters in sight. Are they behind us? Drip. A strange slime lands from above with an eerie plop. Looking up, the group sees a giant Gyrida falling from the ceiling, directly onto them. The Major is tackled, slammed to the ground. The beast pins him down, crushing his chest. Damn it, he growls, struggling beneath its weight. With a quick move, he thrusts his weapon into the monster's mouth and fires, freeing himself. Helmet dirty, he scrambles up and checks on his team. Everyone okay? The soldier shouts for everyone to fall back to the wall as he and Langet engage the beasts. Langet counters an incoming blow with expert precision, using her massive weapon to block the attack. Aleph isn't far behind, slashing through multiple enemies with mechanical efficiency. Advance, the Major commands. Ingress, cover the rear. But another Gyrida appears behind Ingress, ready to strike. Still carrying the metal case, Ingress doesn't notice the danger. Just in time, Aleph throws a star-shaped weapon, striking the Gyrida directly in the skull. The monster drops. The robot asks if Ingress is all right. He nods, grateful. Keep moving, the astronaut orders, as a Gyrida looms ahead. Its three glowing red eyes fixate on them. The Major takes aim through his scope. While sprinting and firing, he calls out to Langet, "Get my plasma cutter, now!" He tosses her the tool. Take out the downed ones. Just swing up and down. No mercy. They charge side by side down the narrow hallway, cutting through the swarm. Suddenly, a massive horned gorilla blocks their path. Without hesitation, they rush the monster with full force, their weapons blazing. After breaking through, the Major calls, "Ingress!" Which way? At a fork in the hall, 2 doors wait. "Go right," Aleph shouts, sprinting alongside them. The Major and Langet dart down the corridor. More monsters await. He reloads and takes aim, ready for the next wave. Finally, they burst through an opening and emerge outside. Rain pours down from the dark sky. Over comms, Ingress reports, "We're outside too, heading up to meet you." Aleph provides cover fire to secure their climb. Over the radio, the robot confirms, "Lower floor is clear." The astronaut lowers his head in relief, overwhelmed by the news. At the command center entrance, Ingress asks if the doors will open for them. Langet replies that he'll have to do it. She can sense frightened Boomy inside. The blue-skinned man agrees and warns everyone to stay sharp. Gripping the lever, he strains to force the heavy gate open. Metal groans as the massive door creaks wider. From the shadows, a voice shouts, "Drop your weapons and back away!" Ingress responds, "We're from the Boomy Defense Force. Surrender now." The voice hidden behind a makeshift barricade asks cautiously, "Are you really with the Defense Force?" The Major's friend nods and says, "Yes." "Show yourself. We just want to talk." Suddenly, 2 blue hands shoot up, and a voice calls out, identifying himself as a member of the Tiganoba group. A blue-skinned man steps forward, hands raised, desperately shouting the name Terras. Ingress immediately recognizes him and asks what on earth he's doing there. With fear in his eyes, the man explains he was running from traitors within his group. He says he was lucky to find a hiding spot, but became separated from his Mokura while searching for food. He then begs Ingress to help him find his lost Mokura. The Major narrates that, while he didn't know what a Mokura was, the man's desperation made it clear. It must mean family. Eyes welling with tears, the young man pleads, saying he would do anything for their help. Still on his knees, hands raised, he introduces himself to the group of warriors. Once again, the blue-skinned man cries out the name Terras, overwhelmed by fear and desperation. The astronaut's friend steps forward and asks why Terras is alone in such a dangerous place. Terras, still trembling, repeats that he was fleeing from traitors and became separated from his Mokura during a food run. He breaks down again, begging them to help find his companion. With tearful conviction, he promises he'll do anything if they assist him. The astronaut kneels and asks solemnly, "Do you truly want to save your family?" Ingress confirms that Mokura indeed means family in their language. He then asks Terras to state his department and the name of his superior. Terras replies, "I'm from the Secretariat. My superior is Mara. The director is Piraka." Ingress takes a deep breath, visibly relieved. He tells the others to stand down, assuring them the situation is under control. He steps forward, introduces himself, and tells Terras he can lower his hands now. The young man, still shaken, kneels and reveals he's a technical advisor, and that he's heard of Ingress before. With tears in his eyes, he once again pleads with them to save his lost family. Aleph then speaks up, stating coldly that rescuing civilians is not within the mission parameters. Shocked, Terras stares at the robot in disbelief. The Major quickly explains that Aleph is an alien intelligence, and its mission is to save the planet Boomy. He then asks Terras if the propulsion unit that crashed nearby belonged to their group. With a serious tone, he demands every detail Terras can provide. Terras describes it: giant, white, outfitted with solar panels, and bearing a drawing of a human. He confirms he saw the Starship Atalante logo and says he knows where the unit is. Eyes full of hope, he offers to guide them, if they'll help save his family. Aleph calculates the odds and states that with this new intel, the mission's success rate has increased by 36%. Ingress makes a decision. He and Aleph will search for the family while the others wait. He asks Terras if he knows any way out of the area. Terras mentions there's a flyer in the hangar, but he doesn't know how to operate it. "I do," Ingress replies. He tells the Major to find Terras's family while he gets the flyer operational. He adds that the flyer could be their escape route and says he'll go ahead with Aleph. The Major nods in agreement. Since Ingress's arm is still injured, he assigns Langet to provide backup. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Terras thanks them profusely. The Major turns to Langet, asking her to assist Ingress. She hesitates, seemingly affected. "I'm fine," she says softly. "I just synced with Terras's emotions for a moment." With determination in her eyes, she promises to protect their friend and says she's counting on the Major. "I'll be back," he assures her, then sets off with Terras and Aleph. Their boots splash through ankle-deep water as they descend into a dark, heavily flooded corridor. Together, they move cautiously through what looks like an old, abandoned hangar. This place must be the submarine hangar, the astronaut notes. We've gone pretty far down. Over the radio, Ingress checks in, asking if they've reached the target position. Almost, the Major replies. He asks if the repairs are complete, and Ingress responds that they're nearly done. He and Langat are working together to fix both the flyer and the hangar systems. Through the comms, Ingress calls to Terrace. Is there a problem? The Major replies, not exactly. We've found his family, safe and sound. Terrace embraces his family as the astronaut and Aleph look on. We're heading back now, the soldier reports. Terrace introduces his family to the Major and explains that they're from a planet called Earth. The astronaut introduces himself in return and says they need to evacuate immediately. Suddenly, he feels tremors beneath his feet. Something is rumbling from deep below. Are those vibrations coming from the facility? He wonders aloud. Over comms, Ingress warns. The hangar floodgates might be opening. Is it a submarine? From the dark water, the monstrous head of a giant creature emerges, eyes locked onto the group. The Major steps cautiously into the water, immediately sensing the danger. Terrace, panicking, says there's another way out, and the Major agrees. They'll have to run for it. Behind them, the massive monster, claws raised, watches as the group flees through the hangar. Can you reach the hangar? Aleph asks over comms. No, the Major replies. We've changed routes. Where does the new exit lead? To the eastern plains, Terrace answers. The astronaut radios Ingress. We're heading to the eastern plains. Something big's in here. Understood, Ingress replies, prepping for immediate launch. The Major shouts that he received the message and keeps running, Terrace's family in tow. As they sprint along the metal catwalk, Terrace calls out, "The exit! It's just around the corner." Leading the group, the Major echoes, "We're almost there." But as they reach the exit, they come to a shocking stop. A massive metal gate blocks their only path. "Damn it," the Major curses. Terrace shouts, "We can open it manually. Over there. Levers on the wall." He points urgently, explaining that pulling the lever should open the gate. Suddenly, a wave of dark water crashes into the corridor, knocking everyone off their feet. "Careful," Aleph warns. "There's an electrical current in the water." The Major yells, "Pull the lever. We have to get out of here." Terrace tells his family to go on ahead, urging them to escape safely. Together, the Major and Aleph strain with all their might to lift the heavy metal lever. With a screech and a rumble, the gears begin to turn. The gate creaks open and bright light floods the hangar's murky waters. "The floodgate's open!" the Major shouts to Aleph. "Let's go!" But then he hesitates. Something feels off. He turns toward the lever, concern on his face. Will the door close again if we let go? "Run," Aleph says, staring at him with its glowing red eye. Terrace grabs the lever. "I'll hold it. Go!" The soldier looks back, torn. Without warning, Aleph shoves him forward. "Run," the machine says firmly. Grunting in frustration, the Major flees, leaving Terrace behind. As sunlight pours in through the open exit, hope seems within reach. Over the radio, the soldier yells the coordinates Terrace gave him. Back at the lever, Terrace confirms the ship's exact location, voice trembling. The monster closes in. And with a final breath, Terrace pleads, "Please, protect my family." The Major glances back as the gate begins to close, and the light starts to fade. He dashes forward, water spraying at his sides, while the red-eyed beast chases him relentlessly. Then, with a single massive swipe, the creature sends him flying, helpless, into the air.